Standing by the window as the city lights of Singapore blurred into a watercolor of the night, Sarah Tan felt herself dissolving. If not for the cold condensation of the wine glass in her hand, she might have melted away entirely, becoming one with the cityscape below. 5 years. A short time for some, an eternity for others. For many it was the time to build a career, start a family and carve out a place in the world. For Sarah, those 5 years had been for one person and one person only, Kevin Lim. He was her everything and the reason for everything she had given up. Their beginning had been brilliant. Sarah was a whirlwind, a junior associate at Straits Law Chambers, one of Singapore's big 4 law firms. Kevin was a Public Service Commission PSC scholarship hopeful, burning the midnight oil in the libraries of NUS and the solitude of his rented room in a Queenstown HDB flat. Their love was a rare orchid blooming in the harsh concrete of reality. Sarah could be drowning in legal documents late into the night, but a single call from Kevin, his voice thick with exhaustion, would wash all her fatigue away. For Kevin, trapped in the seemingly endless tunnel of civil service examinations, Sarah was his only guiding light. He would often look into her sparkling eyes and say, "I can only do this because of you. Just wait until I get in. I'll make you the happiest woman in Singapore." That promise was more than just comfort to Sarah, it was her reason to strive, her assurance of the future. The problem began when Kevin's journey took longer than expected. 1 year turned into 2. Colleagues from his study group began receiving their appointment letters, and with each announcement the weight on Kevin's shoulders grew heavier. Sarah's friends were getting married, their Instagram feeds overflowing with pictures of European holidays and promotion announcements. With each post, Kevin seemed to shrink. One night, drunk and despondent, he cried out to her, "Why am I like this? Everyone is moving forward, but I'm just rotting away in this dark, cramped study cubicle. Sarah, I feel so pathetic." His tears were daggers in her heart. Holding him, she thought, "This can't go on." It wasn't a lack of talent or effort. It was the environment. The noise of expectations, the financial pressure, the instability, all of it was holding him back. In that moment she made a decision. She would become his perfect support system. She would fold her own wings so that he could soar. The next day, Sarah knocked on the door of the managing partner at her firm. Everyone tried to talk her out of it. She was a rising star, a brilliant legal mind just beginning to shine. Her mentor, a senior partner named David Chen, pleaded with her to reconsider. "Sarah, this is too big a gamble. Love is important, but betting your entire career on it, it's foolish." But Sarah's resolve was unshakable. Handing in her resignation, she stated calmly, "This isn't a gamble, Mr. Chen. It's an investment. An investment I believe will succeed." And just like that, Sarah's world turned 180 degrees. She traded her legal texts for cookbooks. The high-stakes tension of the courtroom was replaced by the quiet confines of Kevin's small HDB flat, which became her new workplace. She rose at dawn to plan and prepare nutritious meals, breakfast, dinner, and a packed lunchbox tailored to his health. While he studied, she researched and summarized the latest policy papers and relevant case law. She even became a de facto counselor for his study group members, helping them through their own slumps. Her home became a small sanctuary for aspiring civil servants. The judgment from those around her was harsh. "Are you crazy? What about your own life?" her friends demanded. Her parents, who had sacrificed so much to see her graduate from NUS Law, were heartbroken. "We raised you to be a lawyer and you throw it all away for a man," they lamented through tears. Sarah bore all the criticism in silence. She called herself his chief support officer, firmly believing that Kevin's acceptance letter would be the ultimate vindication of her sacrifice. There was no doubt in her mind Kevin would succeed and they would be happy. That belief was the only thing that kept her going. Time passed relentlessly. When Kevin failed his 4th attempt, the first real cracks appeared in their relationship. He started drinking more, blaming his own incompetence, and Sarah's words of comfort no longer seemed to reach him. Sarah too was wearing thin. Her savings were dwindling and her life, isolated from society and synchronized only to Kevin's study schedule, was eating away at her soul. The once bright light in her eyes had dimmed. Her skin had lost its vibrancy. Sometimes she would catch a glimpse of a stranger in the mirror and a cold dread would wash over her. Am I doing the right thing? The question haunted her like a ghost in the night, but with every dawn she would steel her resolve. She couldn't give up now, she had come too far. To silence her own anxieties, she clung to him even tighter. She added new supplements to his diet and bought good luck charms, placing them secretly on his desk. Her devotion bordered on obsession. It was no longer just about love, It was a desperate battle to prove that her choice had not been a mistake. Finally, after 5 long years, a sliver of light pierced through the tunnel. On his 5th attempt, Kevin Lim's name appeared on the list of successful candidates for the administrative service. Staring at the confirmation screen, they clung to each other and wept tears of joy and tears that washed away the bitterness and pain of the years past. "It's all because of you, Sarah," Kevin said, clutching her hands. "I could never have done it without you. Now it's my turn to take care of you. I'll make you happy for the rest of our lives." With those words, the suffering of the past 5 years melted away like snow. Her investment had paid off. She had proven her choice was right. Now all that was left was to become the happiest woman in Singapore, just as he had promised. The thrill of his success was intoxicating. In the time before he began his training, Kevin dedicated himself completely to Sarah. As if to make up for lost time, he took her to fine dining restaurants, bought her beautiful clothes, and they went for weekend drives to Sentosa. For the first time in 5 years, Sarah felt like she was living a dream, rediscovering the simple joys of being a normal couple. Her bright laughter returned and people remarked on the renewed life in her eyes. Naturally, the conversation turned to marriage. Kevin wanted to formally introduce Sarah to his parents. His father was a simple office worker, but his mother, Catherine Pang, was a formidable figure, the self-made managing director of a mid-sized construction firm, Merlion Holdings. Kevin had often complained about his mother's intense personality and the immense pressure she put on him, but he was certain she would be impressed upon hearing about Sarah's unwavering support. A date was set for the formal meeting. For days Sarah agonized over her wardrobe. How would she explain the 5-year gap in her career? Would they look kindly upon the fact that she had put her life on hold for Kevin? A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach, but Kevin squeezed her hand, reassuring her. "Don't worry, my mom has a good judge of character. When she understands your sincerity, she'll love you. Don't worry about a thing." His confidence gave her courage. The truth is the strongest weapon after all. The meeting place was a private room in a high-end Chinese restaurant at Marina Bay Sands. The heavy wooden doors silenced the outside world. Kevin's parents, who had arrived early, stood as Sarah and her parents entered. Kevin's father had a kind smile, but his mother, Catherine, was sharp and appraising from the very first moment. She gave Sarah a sweeping top-to-bottom glance, offering only a curt nod. The pressure in the room was so thick Sarah felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. The meal began awkwardly. The parents exchanged polite pleasantries, but the conversation repeatedly stalled. Catherine Peng drove the discussion, asking Sarah's parents subtle but pointed questions about their financial status and social standing. Sarah's parents, a modest middle-class couple, answered with nervous difficulty. Sarah could barely swallow her food. Finally, Catherine's sharp gaze landed on Sarah. "Sarah, what is it that you do for a living now?" All eyes turned to her. Sarah moistened her dry lips and gave her prepared answer. "I'm currently taking a break." "A break?" Catherine's voice was laced with ice. "Have you been on a break since you graduated?" "No, Madam Pang. After graduating from NUS Law, I worked as an associate at a law firm for a few years." At this, Catherine's eyes narrowed. "A lawyer? Then why did you quit such a good job?" This was the critical question. Sarah glanced at Kevin beside her. He was trying to maintain a relaxed smile, but she saw the subtle tremor in his eyes. She took a deep breath and spoke as calmly and respectfully as she could. "I wanted to help Kevin focus completely on his civil service exams, so I put my career on hold. For the past 5 years, I've dedicated myself to supporting him." She thought this was an answer worthy of praise, the devotion of a woman who had sacrificed everything for a man's success. But Catherine's reaction was the complete opposite of what she expected. She let out a short derisive laugh and set her chopsticks down with a sharp clatter that split the silence of the room. "What are you seriously telling me, as if it's something to be proud of, that you've been jobless for 5 years, living off my son?" Sarah felt as if she had misheard. The word jobless struck her like a poisoned dart. Catherine's tirade continued, relentless. "In this day and age, what kind of crazy woman throws her life away for a man, a lawyer no less, with such a lack of foresight? It's a good thing Kevin passed. What if he had failed again? Were you planning to leech off him for the rest of your life?" "Madam Pang, you've gone too far," Sarah's mother protested, her face pale. But Catherine didn't even flinch. She turned her steely gaze from Sarah to her own son. "Kevin, what were you thinking, bringing a girl like this to me as a potential daughter-in-law? You're going to be a senior civil servant, a future leader of this country. Is this the kind of woman you plan to have by your side?" A jobless woman with a 5-year career gap who thinks only of latching onto a man. She will be nothing but a liability, a weight holding you down. Sarah's world crumbled. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably. This was more cruel and humiliating than any cross-examination she had ever faced in court. She looked at Kevin, her eyes pleading for help. Please say something. Tell your mother she's wrong. Tell her what I meant to you. Defend me. Tell her my 5 years were not a waste, that I wasn't just jobless. But Kevin said nothing. He sat there silent as a stone, his eyes darting between his mother's furious face and Sarah's shattered one. His pupils trembled as if in an earthquake, and beads of cold sweat formed on his pale forehead. In his silence, Sarah understood everything. He didn't have the courage to defy his mother. For him, now on the cusp of a brilliant career, she was no longer a necessary partner. She was an inconvenient past, a potential burden. Catherine Pang stood up, delivering her final verdict. This marriage is off. I will not have such a daughter-in-law in my family. With that, she swept out of the room. Kevin's father followed with an apologetic look. The room was left with the wreckage of Sarah's family and Kevin, his head bowed in shame. Sarah's father was red with fury and her mother wept silently. Sarah couldn't even cry. Instead, a cold rage began to boil up from the depths of her soul. The betrayal. More than the insult of having her 5 years of devotion negated, it was the silence of the man who had received that devotion that plunged her into despair. His silence was a tacit agreement, a knife twisting in her back. That night, Sarah told Kevin it was over. He belatedly apologized, promising to talk to his mother, begging for another chance. But her heart had turned to stone. It ended the moment you stayed silent, she said coldly. You proved you are your mother's son, not my man. Back in her apartment, Sarah opened a box that had been sealed for 5 years, filled with mementos from her life as a lawyer. Dust-covered law books, a well-worn fountain pen, and her old business card which showed her smiling confidently. She held the card, staring at it for a long time. Then she made a new resolve. She would not be broken. She would show them, all of them, exactly who she was and who she could be. The cold anger ignited into a burning desire for revenge. She would use her most powerful weapon, the law, to bring Catherine Pang's arrogant empire to its knees. This was no longer a story about love and betrayal. It was the beginning of a woman's desperate war to reclaim her dignity and her life. The pit of despair was deep and dark. For days, Sarah shut herself in her room, cutting off the world. She didn't eat, she didn't sleep. She just stared at the ceiling as the past 5 years played out like a film in her mind, agonizing over what to pack in Kevin's lunchbox, carefully ironing his shirts the moment they saw his name on the acceptance list, and cried. Together. It all dissipated like a mirage, leaving only a hollow emptiness and a bone-chilling sense of betrayal. Kevin's messages flooded her phone. I'm sorry. Just give me one more chance. I'm trying to convince my mother. Excuses and please fill the screen, but Sarah didn't reply. His words meant nothing now. His cowardly silence at the dinner had been his truth. He had traded her dignity for his future. She blocked his number and deleted every photo of them together. In her heart, a man named Kevin Lim was erased without a trace. She didn't know how much time had passed. One day, waking from a fitful hunger-induced sleep, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Tangled hair, sunken eyes, cracked lips. The image of the bright, sharp lawyer who once commanded courtrooms was gone. In its place was the face of a defeated woman who had lost everything. In that instant, something snapped her back to reality. Is this what I want to be? No. To crumble like this was exactly what Catherine and Kevin would want. They probably hoped she would quietly disappear, nursing her wounds, forever remembered as the naive, foolish girl from their past. Sarah gritted her teeth. That would not happen. She stood up and walked to the bathroom. Under the cold spray of the shower, she tried to reclaim the person she had been 5 years ago, the confident lawyer armed with logic and law who fought against injustice. She had to become that person again. No, she had to become stronger, colder. After her shower, she pulled out a power suit from the deepest corner of her closet. She had worried it wouldn't fit after 5 years, but it was merely a little loose. She had lost weight. For the first time in years, she sat at her vanity and meticulously applied her makeup. The moment she painted her lips with bold red lipstick, her gaze transformed. They were no longer the eyes of a woman drowning in sorrow. They were the eyes of a hunter who had locked onto her prey. The first place Sarah went was straight Law Chambers, the firm she had left 5 years ago. The managing partner, David Chen, was surprised by her sudden appearance but greeted her warmly. He had heard whispers of what had happened and offered his condolences. Sarah, you must have been through a lot. I knew when you left for that man. Love can blind one's judgment. Instead of bowing her head, Sarah looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Chen, I'm not here for sympathy, I'm here for work. Intrigued by her determined tone, he replied, work? You want to come back to the firm? We'd welcome you anytime, of course, but a 5-year gap is not insignificant. I'm not looking to be rehired. I'm here to retain your services for a case. Sarah opened the briefcase she had brought with her. Inside, she laid out files and documents on Merlion Holdings, Catherine Pang's company. For the past few days, even in her starved state, she had obsessively dug into the company, scraping together every piece of information from news articles, public filings, and industry forums. Merlion Holdings and its managing director Catherine Pang, Sarah said, her voice steady. I want to bring them down. The statement was enough to stun David Chen into silence. He stared at her for a moment, then let out a disbelieving laugh. Well, this is quite something. You want to use the firm for a personal vendetta, Sarah? This is an emotional move, not like you at all. This isn't just about emotion, she retorted, her voice calm but filled with an iron will. This is also a matter of my pride as a lawyer. For the past 5 years, I've watched from the sidelines how Merlion Holdings has grown. Through Kevin, I heard a lot about Catherine Pang's business methods. She's an expert at bending the law to its breaking point to maximize profits. If we dig, we won't just find dust. We'll find a landfill. Sarah began to present her analysis, detailing questionable government tenders Merlion had won, unfair contract terms with subcontractors, and a series of minor workplace accidents that had never been reported to the media. Her briefing was sharp and logical, betraying no sign of her 5-year absence. David Chen's playful expression slowly hardened into a serious one as he listened intently. He scrutinized the documents she presented, asking sharp questions which Sarah answered without hesitation. The familiar tense energy of their old working relationship filled the room. When she finished, David Chen leaned back in his chair with a deep sigh. You haven't changed a bit, Sarah. No, you're even sharper. It seems those 5 years have honed you into a razor's edge. So will you take the case? David Chen paused, considering the risks. Merlion Holdings was a formidable opponent. A wrong move could endanger the entire firm. But in his eyes there was more excitement than fear, the thrill of a hunter facing a great beast. More than that, he didn't want to see a talented junior lawyer crumble because of a personal wound. If she chose to fight back through her work, he would gladly set the stage for her. All right, he said. But on one condition. I will personally lead this case. And you, Sarah, will participate as a consulting counsel for our firm. Your payment will be on a contingency basis. A percentage of the value we recover when we bring down Merlion Holdings. How does that sound? For the first time in 5 years, a genuine smile spread across Sarah's lips. It was not a smile of joy or happiness, but a cold, resolute smile that marked the beginning of her revenge. Excellent, Mr. Chen. Let's do it. Thus began the dangerous alliance between Sarah Tan and Straits Law Chambers. She moved her belongings into a small office provided by the firm. She was no longer someone's shadow. She was now the commander-in-chief, designing a meticulous plan of attack to topple the fortress of Merlion Holdings. Her first target, the weakest link in their chain, the disgruntled subcontractors. The war had already begun. The first step in her revenge was intelligence gathering. Sarah knew that to bring down the formidable fortress of Merlion Holdings, an external assault wouldn't be enough. She needed to create cracks from within to make the walls crumble on their own. For that, she needed an inside source, a whistleblower or a victim who could testify to Merlion's illegal and unethical practices. Spread across her desk was a list of dozens of subcontractors who had worked with Merlion. She spent nights poring over each company's financial statements, contract details, and even the personalities of their owners. One company caught her eye, Pioneer Interior Design, a small firm that had once been respected for its quality work. However, after taking on a major interior finishing project for a Merlion condominium, the company had spiraled into financial trouble and eventually declared bankruptcy. The official reason was overexpansion and cash flow problems, but Sarah sensed a hidden truth. After some digging, Sarah found the former owner of Pioneer, a man named Mr. Lim. He was now making a meager living as a delivery driver for a small eatery on the outskirts of the city. The successful businessman was gone, replaced by a weary middle-aged man defeated by life. Initially, Mr. Lim was wary of Sarah. The mere mention of Merlion Holdings made him shudder, and he refused to talk. Don't even bring up their name. It's all in the past. I don't want to stir up trouble. Sarah didn't give up. She went to his eatery every day and helped out. She mopped the kitchen floor and washed mountains of dishes without a word. She didn't reveal she was a lawyer. She just worked silently beside him, sharing his toil. After a few days, Mr. Lim's defenses began to lower. He asked her why she was doing all this. Only then did Sarah carefully share her story, not her personal history with Kevin, but her professional outrage at Merlian's unfair practices and her commitment to justice. Finally, she handed him her business card. Seeing the words Sarah Tan, attorney at law, Mr. Lim's eyes widened in shock. That night after the eatery closed, Mr. Lim opened up to Sarah for the first time. His story was more shocking than she had imagined. Merlian had forced Pioneer into a deceptive dual contract system. On paper the contract was fair, but in practice, they would verbally demand additional work and last-minute material changes, pushing all the extra costs onto Pioneer. When the project was completed, they would nitpick minor flaws to delay payment for months. Eventually, Pioneer collapsed, unable to pay its workers or suppliers. That woman Catherine Pang, she has no heart, Mr. Lim said, his voice trembling with anger and helplessness. She's a vampire sucking the blood of small companies like ours to feed her own greed. I tried to see a lawyer, I reported them to the Competition Commission, but it was useless. Their legal team is too powerful. I just ended up being blacklisted in the industry. Sarah meticulously recorded his testimony. Then she made him a promise. Mr. Lim, I will help you get justice. And I will make sure Merlian Holdings pays for what they did. Mr. Lim's testimony was just the beginning. Through him, Sarah met other subcontractors who had suffered similar fates. At first, they were afraid to speak out, fearing retaliation. But with Sarah's sincere persuasion and her promise of legal protection, they began to open up one by one. Copies of unfair contracts, records of unreasonable demands, and proof of non-payment began to pile up on Sarah's desk. Small cracks were beginning to form in the Great Dam. Meanwhile, Kevin, who had started his civil service training, was living in a state of constant anxiety. After Sarah cut off all contact, he was plagued by guilt and unease. His mother Catherine acted as if nothing had happened, arranging introductions to daughters of other wealthy families. But Kevin couldn't bring himself to care about any of them. A part of his heart was still occupied by Sarah. He was beginning to realize the depths of the wound his cowardice had inflicted, but it was too late. One day he received a frantic call from Catherine. Are you still in touch with that girl? Her voice, usually so composed, was sharp and trembling. No. We haven't spoken in a while. Why? There's a crisis at the company. I don't know where the leak is coming from, but a group of our old subcontractors are preparing a class action lawsuit. The Competition and Consumer Commission of Singapore has launched an investigation, and the tax authority just notified us of a special audit. This all happened overnight. Someone is organizing this from behind the scenes. Kevin's heart sank. It couldn't be. One face flashed in his mind, Sarah. But he shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. No matter how hurt she was, Sarah wouldn't do something like this. She wasn't that kind of person. It can't be Sarah, Mom. She wouldn't do that. What do you know about her? You said she was a lawyer. The most vicious ones are always the ones who act innocent. Find her contact information immediately. Meet her. Find out what her game is, what she wants. At his mother's command, Kevin reluctantly agreed. He was confused. Was Sarah really behind all of this? If so, what was she thinking? He unblocked her number and after a moment's hesitation called. But all he heard was the cold, mechanical tone of a disconnected line. At that very moment, Sarah was in a strategy meeting with David Chen. The collective lawsuit, the CCCS complaint, and the tax audit were all part of her Phase 1 plan designed to disrupt Merlian's cash flow and put psychological pressure on its management. I think it's time to throw some bait to the media, Sarah said, looking at the plunging graph of Merlian's stock price on her monitor. David Chen nodded with a satisfied smile. Good. I have a friend at the Straits Times who specializes in this kind of corporate expose. It's time to feed the sharks. Sarah's eyes gleamed with a cold light. This was just a beginning. She was going to show Catherine Pang and Kevin Lim that she was not some naive girl who would simply be discarded and disappear. The net of her revenge was just beginning to tighten around its massive prey. The media took the bait hook, line, and sinker. A veteran journalist from a major financial paper, after receiving the documents on Merlian's abuse of subcontractors from David Chen, conducted his own investigation and published a bombshell expose. The headline was Sensational Construction Giant Merlion Holdings Embroiled in Bullying Scandal Faces Class Action Lawsuit from Victimized Firms. The article spread like wildfire online. Its impact was far greater than anticipated. At first it was just another corporate scandal, but as heartfelt interviews with Mr. Lim and other victims were added, public opinion turned sharply against Merlion. Catherine Pang's ruthless business practices were brought into the spotlight and she was painted as a heartless exploitative tycoon. The comments sections of news sites were flooded with thousands of angry messages condemning the company, and calls for a boycott began to emerge. Merlion's stock price plummeted day after day. The lobby of their corporate headquarters was swarmed with reporters demanding answers and protesters from civic groups. Catherine convened an emergency board meeting and berated her legal team, but it was too late to contain the damage. With the tax audit and the CCCS investigation running concurrently, the company's operations were effectively paralyzed. Catherine Pang had never faced a crisis like this. She had started with nothing and weathered countless storms to build Merlion into what it was. But this was different. It felt as though an invisible enemy knew all her weaknesses and was striking with surgical precision at her most vulnerable points. She knew instinctively that Sarah was behind it all, and she trembled with rage. How dare that little tramp try to destroy the company I built with my own two hands? She resolved to find Sarah and confront her, but Sarah had vanished as if into thin air. The HDB flat she had lived in was now occupied by someone else, and even her parents claimed they didn't know where she was. Meanwhile, Kevin's situation was also deteriorating rapidly. As the news of the Merlion scandal spread through the civil service training program, he was instantly branded the son of a villainous tycoon. His peers openly avoided him, and even his instructors looked at him with disdain. He felt it was unfair. He had never been involved in the company's management, yet he was bearing the brunt of the public's anger simply for being Catherine Pang's son. The situation was unbearable. He searched for Sarah frantically. He had to find her to beg her to stop all of this. After asking around, he finally learned that she was working at Street's law chambers. One evening he waited for her outside the office building and caught her as she was leaving. Sarah, the woman who turned to face him, was a complete stranger. The sad, submissive girl he knew was gone, replaced by a woman with a face as cold and impassive as ice. Her eyes looked at him as if he were a pebble on the street. "I have nothing to say to you. Move." She tried to walk past him. Kevin grabbed her arm desperately. "Please don't do this. I know you're doing this. You're trying to get revenge on my mother. But why are you making my life hell too? Do you have any idea what my situation is at the training academy? I didn't do anything wrong." His selfish words brought a contemptuous smile to Sarah's lips. "You did nothing wrong. At that dinner when your mother was insulting my life and my family, what did you do? Your silence stole 5 years of my life. You're not a bystander, Kevin. You're an accomplice. I'm sorry for that. I'm truly sorry. But not the company. That company is my mother's entire life. Please just stop. What do you want? Money? I can give you as much money as you want." At that moment Sarah snapped. She slapped him across the face hard. The sharp crack echoed in the quiet street. Kevin staggered back, cupping his cheek in shock. "Money?" she hissed. "How dare you try to put a price on my time? I don't want your money. I want back what you and your mother took from me, my time, my dignity and my life. It's too late for regrets and apologies. It's far too late." Sarah turned and walked away without a backward glance. Watching her retreating figure, Kevin sank to the ground in despair. He finally realized what he had thrown away was not just a woman. He had destroyed her life, and now it was time to pay the price. Sarah's revenge was now moving into its second phase. She knew that winning the lawsuit against the subcontractors wasn't enough. To deliver the most devastating blow to Catherine Pang, she had to destroy the empire from within using one of Catherine's most trusted allies. Her next target was Mr. Choi, Merlion's chief financial officer. He had been with Catherine since the company's inception and was her closest confidant. But Sarah had discovered his hidden weakness. His son was suffering from a rare disease, and the staggering medical bills had forced him to secretly create a slush fund by embezzling company money. Sarah approached him discreetly. She presented him with evidence that she knew all about his secret fund, backing him into a corner. Then she made him an offer he couldn't refuse. "If you want to save your son, you'll work with me. Hand over Catherine Pang's secret ledgers. In return, I'll overlook your embezzlement. In fact, I'll help position you as a whistleblower, letting you pin all the blame on her while you walk away clean." Choi was torn. He was caught between his loyalty to Catherine and the life of his son. Sarah placed her hand gently on his shoulder and delivered the final blow. The choice is yours. But remember this: when you're in trouble, Catherine Pang will not protect you. Just like her son abandoned me. Those words were the final push he needed. A few days later, a set of encrypted files arrived in Sarah's inbox. It was the secret ledger detailing the flow of Merlian's dark money. The most powerful weapon for her revenge was now in her hands. The secret ledger that CFO Choi provided was Pandora's box. It contained a detailed history of Merlian Holdings' illicit funds, accumulated over decades, lists of bribes paid to politicians and officials, details of shell companies created for tax evasion, and the enormous scale of Catherine Pang's personal slush fund. As Sarah scrolled through the files page by page, she was stunned. This wasn't just corporate corruption. It was a record of massive crimes that undermined the very fabric of society. Sarah David Chen and the forensic team at Straits Law Chambers worked day and night analyzing the ledger. They began gathering objective evidence to corroborate its contents, tracing the flow of money, identifying the beneficial owners of nominee accounts, and conducting background checks on officials suspected of taking bribes. The work was as intricate and precise as assembling a giant complex puzzle. Meanwhile, Merlian Holdings was on the brink of collapse. They lost the first instance of the class action lawsuit from the subcontractors and were ordered to pay a huge sum in damages. The Competition Commission slapped them with a massive fine. Their stock price was on the verge of becoming worthless and banks began calling in their loans. Catherine tried to use her personal fortune to save the company, but it was like trying to right a sinking ship. The empire she had spent her life building was crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide. Catherine was seized by the terror of losing everything. In a last-ditch effort, she reached out to the politicians and senior officials she had kept on her payroll with bribes. But as if by prior agreement, they all avoided her calls or pretended not to know her. The rats were the first to flee the sinking ship. Only then did she realize how hollow the power and connections she had trusted truly were. Finally, Sarah was ready to execute the final stage of her plan. Acting as an anonymous whistleblower, she submitted the secret ledger and all related evidence to the Attorney General's Chambers AGC. Simultaneously, she leaked the story to her most trusted media contacts, setting the stage for a media firestorm. The day the news broke, Singapore was in an uproar. The Merlian Holdings slush fund scandal dominated every headline and Catherine Pang's name was everywhere. The AGC immediately formed a special investigation team, raided the Merlian headquarters, and arrested Catherine and other top executives. Standing before a wall of cameras outside the AGC building, Catherine was battered by a storm of flashing lights. The charismatic, powerful business leader was gone. In her place stood a broken old woman who had lost everything. She couldn't answer any of the reporters' questions as she was led away to the interrogation room. Watching the scene unfold on television, Sarah felt nothing. No joy, no satisfaction. Just a vast hollow emptiness. The end of revenge was far more anticlimactic than she had imagined. The fallout from the scandal inevitably hit Kevin. It was revealed that a portion of Catherine's slush fund had been used to pay for his overseas education and living expenses. He claimed he knew nothing about it, but the public didn't believe him. Kevin was brought in for questioning by the authorities on suspicion of receiving illicit funds, and his dream of becoming a senior civil servant was shattered. Not only was he expelled from his training program, but he was also barred from public service employment for several years. Having lost everything, Kevin came to find Sarah. He waited for hours in the rain outside her office building. When Sarah found him on her way home, she tried to walk past him coldly, but he fell to his knees before her. "Sarah, I was wrong. I committed a mortal sin. Please forgive me. I have nothing left now. I feel like I'm going to die without you. Can't we start over? I'll spend the rest of my life atoning for what I did." He wept pathetically, a mess of tears and mucus. His current desperation mirrored the way he had once pleaded for her support 5 years ago. But this time Sarah's heart did not waver. "Get up," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The person you should be kneeling to is not me. It's yourself and the 5 years of my life that you threw away. And start over. Don't make me laugh. You abandoned me when you had everything, and now you come back to me when you have nothing. You never loved me, not for a single moment. You only ever used me when you needed me." Sarah turned her back on him. She could hear his desperate cries behind her, but she did not look back even once. In her life, the man named Kevin Lim had finally completely become a thing of the past. A few months later, Catherine Peng was found guilty of embezzlement, breach of trust, and bribery and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Merlion Holdings went bankrupt and everything she had dedicated her life to building vanished into thin air. CFO Choi, who had turned over the ledger, was recognized as a whistleblower and received a suspended sentence, allowing him to secure the funds needed for his son's medical treatment as Sarah had promised. Sarah Tan was made a full partner at Straits Law Chambers. On the back of the Merlion case, she gained a reputation as a top corporate litigator and received numerous offers from other major corporations. However, she turned them all down, choosing instead to dedicate more of her time to pro bono cases for the socially disadvantaged. Revenge was over. But Sarah's real life was just beginning. She was no longer a supporting character in someone else's success story. She stood tall on her own with her own name and her own abilities. The wounds of the past had not fully healed, but she accepted them as a part of her, and they had made her stronger. She had learned the hard way that true happiness is not found by depending on someone else but by protecting one's own dignity and forging one's own path. And that was the single invaluable lesson she had learned through 5 years of sacrifice and a brutal, all-consuming revenge.